Man, I'm gonna have to make a playlist just for Big Lundy. Also, here's a video with Big Lundy.
Oh, why do I do this to myself?
What, the eating, the smoking, the midget tranny porn? Oh wait, that's me. Sorry, go on.
I don't know. Maybe secretly I'm a masochist. So, I'm responding to Snakepliskinist for some reason or another. Alright, let's try and make this as short as I possibly can. First point, he quotes me defining the etymology of the word philosophy, which means love of wisdom, and says that I don't love wisdom or else I'd call myself a philosopher. Of course, he completely disregards that most modern philosophers define philosophy differently from each other, and that I'm going by modern language states. Not sure why he decided to ignore that. Oh, never mind. It's why he does anything, to make snide remarks and make people feel like he's pwned me in some way or another.
Well, that's just not true. I've never thought that I've pwned you, even if I knew what the word pwn meant. I can't take credit for it any more than, let's say I'm fishing on a raft in a lake, and a fish just jumps out of the water onto my raft. I can't say, hey, look at this fish that I caught with my cunning angling skills, right? Similarly, I just, point a big neon sign saying, look at this jackass. I'm really just like your agent, man.
Oh yeah, I still love wisdom. But I wouldn't consider myself a philosopher, because I consider a philosopher to be someone who has actually published work within the academic field in modern days. I have not, so I don't call myself a philosopher.
Yeah, but let's say you have one of those old school love of wisdom philosophers. Well, if he loves wisdom, he would have acquired the wisdom that a degree in philosophy is utterly fucking useless in every way, in every field. It won't help you get a job, it won't help you make money, and really it won't help you understand the world better, because, you can just formulate ideas on your own. So it's not wise to have a degree in philosophy, so I would put forth that those who do not have degrees in philosophy are the better philosophers, at least by that old school definition of loving wisdom.
I comment on philosophy a lot because it's my field of study. God forbid I demonstrate an adequate knowledge of my own field of study. He also says that philosophy isn't a job that requires credentials, and that's almost too stupid for me to address. The idea that people without any qualifications or credentials can just call themselves philosophers without anyone being able to argue is just silly. If that's true, then the same can be said of science, and I'm guessing that Snake doesn't think that science works like that.
Hey, Amazing Kreskin, you probably shouldn't try to read my mind. It's not filled with big print and lots of pictures. Anyway, you're wrong, as usual. There are people who like to go out with telescopes, look at planets and stars and various celestial objects as they wend their way through the heavens. They make detailed notes. They call in to the Astronomical Society. These people are known as amateur astronomers, right? And they don't make any money with astronomy. They don't publish in the peer review, but they are still astronomers. They just, don't make any money at it, hence the amateur part. Okay? Similarly, a person could say they're a scientist as long as they're, making detailed observations of and experiments with the natural world and trying to derive knowledge from it, even if they don't get into the peer review, even if they don't have a degree. That just makes them not a necessarily very good scientists. That means people won't necessarily listen to them, but it doesn't mean that they're not doing science. It just means that nobody cares. Okay? Same thing with you and your little philosophy business. Much like the amateur astronomer doing these astronomer things, you are doing philosophy things. Namely, the only thing I think philosophy entails, which is yammering on about shit, collecting ideas like they're shiny baubles, petting them lovingly rather than trying to actually get the knowledge contained within them. Yeah, you're a philosopher, man, an amateur philosopher. There's no way around it.
He even goes far enough to say that he can call himself a philosopher and say that I'm a philosopher, and I can't argue against it because all modern philosophers define philosophy differently. Yeah, no. Just like the idea of multiple quantum interpretations doesn't mean that one can't say that one interpretation is a real interpretation, that argument fails.
What did I tell you about using that analogy? It's so fucking stupid. with the quantum interpretations, there is an actual physical reality that exists independent of us, that can be observed, where philosophy as an academic discipline, or even just an abstract concept, is entirely a mental construct of humans. And it's whatever we fucking say it is.
He then seems to imply that anything he says matters to me, and that one can draw the line between his videos to me and me making a video where I say in the video that it's addressed to the Magic Sandwich Show as me making a response to him. No. He then gets Integral Math's argument wrong, even though he shows me explaining it in the video, which made me giggle.
Yeah, I can picture you giggling.
He then says that I admit that all philosophy does is a matter of interpretation. Nope. I said that the definition of philosophy is debated on by modern philosophers, not that its uses are a matter of interpretation. Those are two different things.
Well, no. Defining something comes logically prior to defining its uses. Let me just give a little funny story. Let's say there's two guys who define coal differently. One says coal is an accumulation of carbon bonded to more carbon, and one says it's an accumulation of carbon bonded to carbon and contains a large number of double bonds but also single bonds. Alright, well, the first guy would actually have a lot more uses for this coal because his definition would include diamonds. So in addition to all the burning and shit, you could give them to women to get laid, you could use them to cut through hard substances, etc. But see, first, you have to determine what the fuck you're talking about before you can determine what the fuck it does. And this is a relatively simple philosophical precept, and it pisses me off that I have to explain it to you, Mr. Philosophy Genius.
He then repeats the claim that nobody needs credentials to be a philosopher, so to borrow a quote from him, whatever helps you sleep at night, buddy.
God damn it, that is not the correct usage of that. That's what you say when somebody is saying something to comfort themselves. Like when you in that video were saying, well, I just, Snakepliskinist, he don't know what he's talking about, and I don't even care about that shit. No, I don't. And then I said that. See, that's the appropriate situation, where if you're just disagreeing with an assertion that I have made, that's not the correct usage. I mean, come on, man. Don't borrow my shit unless you're going to use it correctly.
He then says that Integral Math ignored my explanations of what philosophy does for brevity's sake. Well, that's rather dumb.
Well, since I don't like to pay attention myself, I'm not going to try to make you feel bad about this, but you weren't paying attention. What I said was that I ignored you for brevity's sake. When you said that, you know, philosophy is the basis for all our laws and morality, and then I just totally disregarded that because it's retarded. I mean, I explained the whole thing in my other video, no need to rehash it, just, you know, pay attention.
Fact is, I explained philosophy and what it does in the video. Integral Math clearly watched it and then asked what philosophy does, and that's silly.
Yeah, silly to those of us who don't have the subtext gene. Allow me to translate. When Integral Math, after watching your video explaining what philosophy does, asking you what philosophy does, is his way of saying, motherfucker, your explanations were not satisfactory. You're welcome.
In response to me saying that philosophy is the basis for laws, he says, well, there's a biological basis for morality, then never explains it, so good job expounding on a vague point that I'm fairly certain violates the naturalistic fallacy from the sounds of it.
What are you talking about, Lundy? The naturalistic... Oh, yeah. If it violates the naturalistic fallacy, well, I don't want to sound like an English teacher, but if it violates a fallacy, wouldn't that make it a valid argument? Also, it's a vague point that I didn't expect. Well, I thought it was pretty fucking obvious, man. I mean, it's just simple, like, evolution 101. Morality is just the way the individuals of a collective have found a way to work together while meeting their own self-interest. Morality is just sort of this in-between point where we determine where self-interest gets its way and where society gets its way. That's the whole basis of morality. I mean, insects have morality. The only difference is, or like, a hive of bees, all of these bees behave according to certain rules. The only real difference is they don't yammer on and on about it like they're special. They just do it, and they don't pretend like they're all individuals.
He then says that the way people behave towards each other is summed up as, they arrive, look at what everyone's doing, copy it, and add a little variation. That's just childish. Absolutely childish. If that were true, then why do we have moral disagreements?
Yeah, retard, those moral disagreements, those gigantic, all-important, paramount moral disagreements. Yeah, that would be the very minutiae to which I am referring. For all of the importance that you seem to think moral disagreements have, really, those people with their moral disagreements agree on so many other things, so very many other things, not just morality, but, things like manners, or social behaviors, right? So, all of these things are more or less uniform with just like a little bit of thing like, my morals are this, my morals are that, like it's some big thing. It's not a big thing. It's almost nothing compared to the uniformity with which they behave. And honestly, I distrust people who think of morality as this huge thing that needs to be talked about, because those people always turn out to be the biggest shits. Without fail.
How do new laws that recognize a minority view as being more valid than the majority view come about? If that were the case, if everybody just looked at what everyone else was doing and then copied them, why do we have revolutionary things like, stopping slavery or the civil rights era? I don't know.
Well, to go back to what I was saying with the bees and their morality, see, their morality is just sort of hardwired into them. So they're sort of like little biological machines with moral programming. Humans are a bit more complex, and we have our big brains. So it's not just wired in behavior, but sort of like a disposition towards morality, and then a morality which is learned and then codified in our laws. These revolutions are just because as the pervasive moral construct changes, the ostensible codification of these constructs, our laws, change as well. Okay, so I don't understand what the hell was I talking about? Too much philosophy medicine.
Your explanation of morality and laws and how they develop is totally inadequate to explain just about everything in the history of morality.
The history of morality, you say? Wait, I am recalling something from when I was a young man taking a Western Civ class. I think in Greek, the word ethikos originally came from the word meaning custom, or what other people are doing, basically, right? And the Romans, they had some word, I cannot remember it, it meant like, do what your parents do, and it's the same word as morality. But goddamn, I can't remember it, and I'm just so lazy that I'm not going to look it up. But why don't you look it up, man? Because, I mean, you're a refined intellectual. I'm like a one-eyed turnip farmer. I'm not going to, like, Google that shit. I mean, do I look like I'm made out of time? Do you see this gray here? Take care of it.
And apparently the laws just come as an application of what he says morality is, plus the self-interest of the people making the laws. Now, I know Snakepliskinist hates when I do this, but seriously, dude, you need to read more.
Oh, this is one of those funny misunderstandings. See, it's because of our different styles. What you do is, you'll read a book, and then you're so proud of yourself, you will speak of the reading you've done in perpetuity. So, I don't do that, so you're like, I can only conclude that this fellow does not read, because he does not at every opportunity speak of other books he's read. I'm reading this good book, well, it's good to me. It's called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. I'm only about halfway through, and it's had a lot of interesting things about corn and its domestication. You know, now that I think about it, it sounds really boring, and I can't make it sound exciting, but, you know, there's a lot of factual information in here. Yeah, you know, facts, those things, those anchors to reality.
I know reading is probably something that you hate to do, and you really hate when I quote philosophers or if I talk about philosophers that you don't know, and you think that I'm being pretentious and all that kind of stuff. But seriously, you should read more. Our laws aren't just people observing each other and copying it and putting it into legislation and then saying everyone should act this way because I observed other people doing it that way. And that's not how it works. If you honestly think that it's that simplistic, you should really read more about, you know, Thomas Hobbes.
Oh my god, no, it's not that simple. I just have a gift for nutshelling things, distilling a thesis to its very essence, if you will. It's a gift of mine. Do I really think it's that simple? It's like if okay, let's say there was a crime, and both of us were witnessing it, and I'm like, yeah, this dude stabbed this other dude, and then he died. And you're like, no, actually what happened was the knife penetrated his descending aorta, piercing its lumen, and causing him to insanguinate. The reduced levels of oxygen in the brain caused the ATP production to go down, which in turn made the neuron start depolarizing at random, starting in the forebrain and working its way toward the hindbrain, at which point the respiration ceased. Why, your version was far too simplistic. Yes, they're both correct. It's just one is long and tediously wordy, and nobody really gives a damn about what you're saying, and mine is rather brief, entertaining, yet informative. Main information being that your life's endeavor is futile.
Hobbes, John Locke, you know, the foundation behind our Constitution. Jeremy Bentham, who refuted the idea of natural rights.
So I can only assume that John Locke, his signature is on the... No? Wow.
Fuck. Modern philosophers like Peter Singer or Thomas Nagel, just so that you can get a cursory idea of what you're trying to talk about. Remember how in the video you responded to, Snake, I said that you constantly demonstrate a lack of knowledge on the subject that you're commenting on? Cal fucking Supri, here's a prime fucking example. He then mocks the idea that the philosophy of mind of the philosophy of mind by characterizing it as scientists doing all the work and the philosophers commented on it ex post facto. Well, no. Daniel Dennett, as I said in an earlier video addressed to Enneagram, is co-director of the Center for Cognitive Studies. In other words, Snake, he drives the studying. He doesn't comment on it after the studying is already done. He drives it, monitors it, and also comments on it after it's done.
Well, this is fully consistent with what I've been saying, which is science incorporates the very best properties of philosophy, subsumes the entire discipline in terms of usefulness, right? So this fellow is a part of the productive engine of science. When I say philosophers, I really mean... See, I mean, if he's accomplishing things, then vis-a-vis my interpretation of philosophy, he's not really a philosopher anymore. He's a scientist, or at the very least a science director. He's not a, you know, one of you. I don't know of a polite way to say it, and I'm feeling nice today. You know, I'm feeling extra polite. It's my curse, I'm a giver.
So he takes part in the whole scientific process, but apparently this is totally beyond Snake's knowledge. Then, of course, who cares about the fact that philosophers have to establish a priori any scientific investigation if it's even rational to presume that reductionist materialist methodologies will be sufficient to figure out everything about the brain and the mind that we want to know? But fuck all that. Nobody cares about how science and its research is driven by philosophy.
Science is driven by philosophy. Well, I suppose that's true in the sense that the Borg collective are driven by the drones that they have assimilated. You see, I mean, the drones are basically their bitch, but they couldn't survive without the drones, because, I mean, that's what the Borg do, right? Well, that's how philosophy is. See, science, it assimilated the philosophy, harnessed its usefulness and discarded the dregs, heretofore or hereafter referred to as Mr. Lundy. Oh, what was I saying? I was being kind of mean. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Apparently, evidently, somewhere I said that the philosophy of mind is more important than any sort of cognitive science. At least those are the words that Snake seems to be attributing to the philosophers of the mind. Of course, like most of the time, he is pulling this out of his ass. He then says that philosophy isn't why we reject mind-body dualism because it came up with mind-body dualism. Snake, have you ever argued with a creationist who brings up things like the Piltdown Man or any other evolutionary hoax?
Well, let me just stop your false analogy right there. Now, I'm not saying don't listen to philosophy because it came up with this stuff and was wrong. No, 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 no. What I'm saying is... Oh, man, what am I saying? Oh, yeah. If philosophy comes up with mind-body dualism, and science is what thoroughly debunks that shit, and philosophy just sort of stands and waits for the results, that's all fine and well. We know what philosophy is. Okay, it's cool. It's all Jake, as they say. But the one thing you cannot claim is...
Because philosophy is the reason that we reject mind-body-substance dualism. What's one of the popular responses to these hoaxes? Yes, and science was what debunked them. Same thing here, brother. Apparently he thinks philosophers came up with mind-body dualism, and then science came in and did research, and then philosophers took credit for all their work. No, Snake, no. I recommend the book History of the Mind-Body Problem by Crane, Tim, Patterson, and Sarah.
Yeah, I read a few chapters into that. It was a derivative restatement of Hume's work. The thing is... I forgot what I was saying, but no. Yeah, it's a populist explanation for well-understood concepts, just so that the layman can understand them. But here's the thing. Understanding what is essentially the cliff notes of the academic world, I mean, I wouldn't go around bragging about my reading abilities were I you.
Again, you should read more. It makes you sound like less of an idiot when you do. The reason science was even able to begin investigating the brain as if the mind and the brain were not separate was, before all the research, before Snake, not after, other philosophers went against mind-body dualism, put forth the mind-body problem, and then said that the mind-body problem is better accounted for.
Yes, but for all their sitting around idly speculating about these things, for all it accomplished, I mean... they may as well have been betting on a horse race. And much like betting on a horse race, just because you bet, that doesn't mean you're a fucking jockey.
Presuming that the mind and the body are in fact not separate, which then allowed for science to investigate it. In fact, it was brought up pretty much the same time mind-body dualism was formulated by René Descartes.
Like, OMFG, I'm not even like one of those philosophical geniuses and shit. But mind-body dualism has been around for fucking ever. Even the ancient Greeks, they had their, Elysian fields and their afterlife. It actually sounded like a pretty dismal afterlife, in my opinion. But an afterlife presupposes this mind-body dualism, that there is this essence that transcends the physical self and lives on after it. So, and then there's also the Egyptian afterlife, all of these thousands of years before some Frenchman said, I think therefore I am, and blah blah blah, mind-body dualism. So yeah, you're just totally fucking wrong on that one. I mean, the entire idea of this soul, like, we have souls. That's mind-body dualism. Reincarnation, that presupposes mind-body dualism. What? That predates Rene Descartes sitting down and saying that shit? Are you a fucking retard? Well, you know, I think this video is... It's been a long and wonderful journey, and I think it's time for this journey to end. Everybody have a nice day.